Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari Yashoda Nandana Brajanjanandana Yashoda Nandana Brajanjanandana Yamuna Jira Vanachari Yamuna Jira Vanachari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivar Chakacharya Sota Sat Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glorious assembled devotees. All glorious assembled devotees. All glorious assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru. All glories to Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Tinamane. Nama Om Vishnupadaaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishisha Shunyavadi Pashacha Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 13, text number 9. This chapter is entitled The Appearance of Lord Varaha. So I could pull up the verse. I could pull up 3:13:9. Okay. Brahmā uvāca prītaḥ tubhyam aham tāta svasti stād vam kṣitīśvara yat nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi ma iti ātmanā arpitam. Okay. Brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tattvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti stād kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ahaṁ brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti stād kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam. Please repeat. Brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam. Mothers. Brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam brahmovāca prītas tubhyam aham tāta svasti tādvam kṣitīśvara yan nirvyalīkena hṛdā śādhi mety ātmanārpitam. Okay, word for word. Brahmā uvāca. Brahma said, prītaḥ, please, tubhyam, unto you, aham, I, tāta, my dear son, svasti, all blessings, stād, let there be, vam, unto you both, kṣitīśvara, O Lord of the world, yat, because, nirvyalīkena, without reservations, hṛdā, by the heart, śādhi, give instruction, mā, unto me, iti, thus, ātmanā, by self, arpitam, surrendered. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Lord Brahmā said, my dear son, O Lord of the world, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for you both and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions. Purport. The relationship between the father and the son is always sublime. The father is naturally disposed with goodwill towards the son, and he is always ready to help the son in his progress in life. But in spite of the father's goodwill, the son is sometimes misguided because of his misuse of personal independence. Every living entity, however small or big he may be, has the choice of independence. If the son is unreservedly willing to be guided by the father is 10 times more eager to instruct and guide him by all means. The father and son relationship, as exhibited here in the dealing of Brahmā and Manu, is excellent. Both the father and the son are well qualified, and their example should be followed by all humankind. Manu, the son, unreservedly asked the father Brahmā to instruct him, and the father, who was full of Vedic wisdom, was very glad to instruct. The example of the father of mankind may be rigidly followed by mankind, and that will advance the causal relationship of fathers and sons. Oh my God, Nama Om Vishnu-padaya Krishna-Vishaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Nama Om Vishnu-padaya Krishna-Vishaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Bhajarane Nirvishisha Shunyavadipa Shashadashatane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so I'll just read the translation again. Lord Brahmā said, my dear son, O Lord of the world, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for you, for both of you and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions. So what's going on here is in the previous chapter, Lord Brahmā was perplexed because he wanted to generate population for humankind. And as he was contemplating how to do so, Manu and his wife manifested. And so after his wife and Manu manifested, in the previous verse, Manu is glorifying Lord Brahmā. He's asking for direction for the execution of duty. Right after he was manifested. And this was very pleasing to Lord Brahmā because, as was stated previously, the 4 Kumaris were reluctant to follow the instruction of Lord Brahmā. But Manu, without hesitation, surrendered without any doubt to the instructions of Lord Brahmā. So this was very pleasing to Lord Brahmā, and this is where we are at right now. So in this verse, there's many different points. I'm first going to just speak on the father's duty to prepare his child for spiritual life. As Prabhupada is hinting at, that when the father is qualified and the son is qualified, then what happens is society becomes peaceful. But what happens now in society is the father is unqualified and the son is equally unqualified, which is causing havoc in society. Because of bad fathers incapable of raising their child to Krishna consciousness, you're seeing that most children are actually growing up feeling neglected or abandoned. Even when the children are getting that type of attention from their father is guiding them in the wrong direction. Like you see like Donald Trump and his sons. I mean, Donald Trump pretty much has an enterprise and he pretty much has taught his sons everything he knows how to be a demon, right? So there are instances where the son does listen to the father, but when the father is not qualified, it still is not beneficial for neither the son nor the father. So the father's duty is to prepare their child and their family, actually, for that matter, for spiritual elevation. And it says, Rishabhadev says that you should not become a father, guru, or any type of leader if you're not capable of bringing up the consciousness of those who are under you. So it's actually a very heavy task, actually. And Lord Brahmā is instructing all of humankind what type of character you should have to be in that position. Ultimately, the father needs to have good character, and the son needs to equally have good character as well. In one purport in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says that the study of the Vedas is meant for the formation of good character. And one may argue that, what does good character have to do with Krishna consciousness? What does me having good character have to do with me wanting to love Krishna? Well, ultimately, the study of the Vedas is encouraging the living entities to give up their bad habits. One cannot be of good character and still have bad habits. You know, if you're having bad habits, then what happens is your character also is reflected with your bad habits. So the duty of the father, like Lord Brahmā, he had good character, even though he mentally had a fall down. He still is setting that example of how a father should be and how the son should reciprocate. Like I said, ultimately, the duty of the Krishna consciousness movement is to raise the consciousness of society and to raise the characters of society and produce qualified leaders. Everybody in this room is a leader. Everybody in this room is expected to have good character because people are looking up to us. Whether you think so or not, when people see us, shaved heads on the street, giving out literature, and we're telling people we're renounced from the material world, they're looking up to us because they say, how is this possible? How is it possible that you're renouncing sex life? How is it possible that you're renouncing intoxication, gambling, meat eating? How is this possible? So when there are leaders in society and they have bad character, you see chaos in society. This is also mentioned in the pastime of Prithu Maharaj and Indra. When Prithu Maharaj wanted to conduct 100 horse sacrifice, Indra became envious because Indra knew that any person who performed that yajna would attain great power. So Prabhupada makes a point that what happened was Indra dressed himself up as a sannyasi and he stole the last horse from King Prithu to prevent him from doing the sacrifice. And Prabhupada makes a point that when leaders of society are cheating and they are committing abominable activities, it creates havoc in society. So, and you see that also with the Krishna conscious movement after Prabhupada left. That after Prabhupada left, the character of some of his disciples who were taking on the role of the GBC, their character wasn't ideal. And you see it caused havoc in the society. Even though people under them might have had good character, when the person on top has bad character, it completely causes havoc in society. So Prabhupada is teaching us, whether you are a son, I think Vishnu Chitta was making this point, whether you are a father or not, you're still expected to be a leader in any capacity, whether leading your children or leading other disciples. But you should have good character to do so. Nonetheless, it also is important, this is a very important point, that if ultimately your father is meant to guide you in spiritual development, but your father, if he's not of good character, but you are trying to be of good character, then you reject your father. But this is important. You still respect him, you just reject his instructions. And I think when people first come to Krishna conscious movement, this dilemma is kind of hard to come by, where you realize that your father or parents or whatever are giving you adverse instructions. So you completely reject that instruction, but you should not reject your father in the process. And Prabhupada makes this point, actually. I'm actually going to take over the screen. Because it's important, because ultimately we are indebted to our parents for giving us his body. And Prabhupada makes a good point that I'll bring it up in a second. Let me just try to connect. Okay, so Prabhupada makes this point in 10:45, 5 through 7. Okay, so this is Krishna speaking. With one's body, one can inquire all goals of life, and it is one's parents who give the body birth and sustenance. Therefore, no mortal man can repay his debt to his parents, even if he serves them for a full lifetime of 100 years. The next verse says, a son who, though able to do so, fails to provide for his parents with his physical resources and wealth, is forced after his death to eat his own flesh. A man who, though able to do so, fails to support his elderly parents, chaste wife, young children, or spiritual master, or who neglects a brahmana or anyone who comes to him for shelter is considered dead, though breathing. This is pretty some heavy stuff. So if you're able to support your parents, but you fail to do so out of disrespecting them, then this is not pleasing to Krishna, actually. Krishna's making this is very clear in the Bhagavatam. And also Srila Prabhupada taught this as well to his disciples, that I think it was Brahmananda. I've heard this story, please correct me, but Srila Prabhupada with Brahmananda, they visited their parents. I think his parents were Catholic. And Prabhupada told Brahmananda to touch his parents' feet or something like that. He told him to bow down. I think he told him to bow down to his parents. And Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, your parents are actually, they're innocent, they're sweethearted, even though they weren't directly Krishna conscious, because they gave the body to Brahmananda." Prabhupada instructed his disciple to still respect his parents. So it is important to realize that rejecting instruction does not mean being disrespectful to that person. Just like Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, that his father was a demon, outright demon. But you see, Prahlad Maharaj is still very respectful towards his father. And he is a Mahajan. We should follow his example. So you should always maintain, not only for your father, for all living entities, actually, Trinadapi, Shunichina, that, Amanina, Manadina, that all living entities you show respect to, actually. It's not just your father. What to speak of your father or your parents. But like I said, when you first come to Krishna consciousness, it's a little immature, because you finally realize, oh wow, I'm not the body, my parents, they just gave me this body, but that's not me, and whatever. And it's easy to become, offensive to your parents in that way. But actually, when you do that, you're actually making them averse towards Krishna consciousness. But if you are equally opposed to them, rejecting their instruction but still being respectful to them, you can actually gradually elevate them. Just by they're seeing you have good character, right? And by seeing them, you developing good character, they will be appreciative of it. So it's a very important point that Srila Prabhupada keeps saying that Srila Prabhupada is making, that it's a good example that needs to be set between the father and the son. Nonetheless, if your father is qualified to guide you, right, and you reject his instruction, then you become a rascal. You become a rascal. If your father is qualified, for example, Srila Prabhupada, he narrates how his father was a pure devotee. He actually dedicates his Krishna book to his father. And Srila Prabhupada narrates how his father used to, do arti all night. He heard ding, 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 ding. He was doing arti all night, and then he would go to work. And then his father trained him up and playing the mridanga and such and such. So Prabhupada rejected his father's instruction out of some type of sentiment. Then he becomes a rascal because his father actually elevated him. And the principle, Prabhupada is a Nityasiddha, but in the past time, that Srila Prabhupada's father played that role of making sure his son had good character. And that's something we could all try to follow in whatever capacity. So when the Father does give you that proper instruction, there's mercy in those instructions. Before I get to that, you see in this pastime with Manu and Lord Brahmā, it's interesting. Before Brahmā actually instructed Manu, Manu was already surrendered. Already before Lord Brahmā actually gave him any instruction to what to do, Manu was glorifying Lord Brahmā because he respected his position as a father and of the, I guess you say, leader of humankind at that point, or even still now. So it's important. Surrender comes before following the instructions of the spiritual master. It's not that, okay, I'm going to surrender once I get instructions from the spiritual master. No, you surrender first. And then first, once you surrender, then you're qualified to receive the instructions of the spiritual master. If not, what happens is you become duplicitous. And I'm going to speak more about that in my class, but you have to surrender first. By surrendering first, you're able to actually fully carry out the duties of the spiritual master. And by doing so, like Lord Brahmā is saying, I desire all blessings for you both. Lord Brahmā is, I'll just go back to this verse. He's blessing Manu because he sees that Manu is eager to surrender. He's eager to take his instruction. This sharanam gacha, this he utterly surrendered unto the lotus feet of his father because his father was qualified. And because of that, he received blessings even before receiving any instructions. Actually, the real blessings is through the instructions. People come to the spiritual master, ask for blessings. The real blessings is in him instructing you and guiding you. That is the real blessing. So the mercy is in the instruction, following the instruction and doing it in a submissive attitude. But it comes first by surrendering first. You surrender first. And what does that surrender mean? What is surrender? Well, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, kṣitīśvara durgani mat prasada tarishasi ahaṁ. What does that mean? Krishna says that for those who are fully conscious of me, they can overcome durgani. They can overcome all obstacles. Durgani, the root word of that is Durga. And another word for Durga, it means fort. So in the material world, there's always going to be obstacles, there's going to be forts of difficulties in our lives. But Krishna says, that you can overcome this. Tarishashi, you can overcome this. How? Simply by being conscious of him. That is it. But what happens if you don't become conscious of Krishna? What does he say? By following your false ego, what happens? You become lost. So by following your false ego and not following utterly and surrendering utterly to the lotus feet of the Guru, then you become finished. You become a burdensome disciple. And you see this actually in the branch of the Lord Chaitanya tree with the Chutananda. You had Advaita Acharya, and he had 6 sons. And 3 of them were proper and 3 of them were rascals. So Achutananda was a proper son of Advaita Acharya. Why? Because he followed his instructions and carried out his instructions. But the other sons, because they end up being Mayavadis, they end up being burdens to the father. So you have to be conscious of Krishna's instruction. And being conscious, when Krishna says, be conscious of me, it's not that, oh, let me just be conscious. I mean, in the beginning stages, Prabhupada tells us that we shouldn't just try to meditate on Gopi Leela, Krishna Leela. That's kind of so we should be conscious of Krishna. Yeah, this is the verse. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. By Krishna's grace, you can pass over all obstacles. Krishna is telling us how we can become successful in the struggle for existence simply by being conscious of him. If, however, you do not work in such conscience but act through your false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. You will be lost by acting in your false ego. So, like I said, ultimately the Guru is here to give us. Ultimately, the Guru plays a role as a father. The Guru is seen as the second father, and the mother is seen as the Vedas. And by both, then we could make rapid spiritual advancement. So the duty of the guru, the duty of the father, is to say the same thing that Krishna said. Actually, if you think about it, becoming a preacher is not so hard. All you have to do is repeat what your guru said and what Krishna said. But it becomes difficult once you try to act through the false ego. Once you act through the false ego, things become difficult. The thing is, obstacles will be there. Krishna's not saying the obstacles won't be there. He's saying the obstacles will be there, but you can overcome them. Meaning that although you're going through difficulty, you can overcome them by being conscious of Krishna. So this is a very important point, that the father's duty is to elevate his son, and the guru's duty is to elevate the disciple just by repeating the instructions of the guru. And like I was saying, Krishna says in the next verse, if you not act according to my direction and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare. And Prabhupada says that in the purport, no one should neglect the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the order of the spiritual master, who is representative of God. One should act unhesitatingly, sorry, I messed that up, to execute the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That will keep one safe under all circumstances. This is the same thing. Krishna is saying, without hesitation, act under the order of Krishna. And Prabhupada is also saying in this verse, without reservation. He's saying the same thing. You have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. So without reservation, without duplicity, without being duplicitous, you should act under the order of the spiritual master. And it's very important that you do so through the instructions. By acting through the instructions, this is how you become conscious of the spiritual master and Krishna, by being conscious of his instructions. This is very important. And you see this with the pastime of Madhavendra Puri. So I want to go through that. It's really nectar. So Madhavendra Puri is a great acharya in our line. He is the guru of Ishvara Puri, who is the guru of Lord Chaitanya. So Madhavendra Puri, one day he traveled to Vrindavan, and he went to Govardhan. He was performing his bhajan, and he sat under a tree. He was about to take rest. And as he was about to take rest, a little cowherd boy came up to him, and Madhavendra Puri at this point was fasting. So the little boy cowherd boy gave him some milk, and then he went on his way. And then the cowherd boy told him, okay, after you take this milk, just return the milk pot to me. I'll be back soon. So after Madhavendra Puri took the milk, he was looking for this boy, and he didn't find him. And then in his dream, the same boy told him, hey, come, I want to show you something. He took him to the bush, and he said, I am in this bush. I've been here for some time. I want you to take me out and install me on top of the hill. When Madhavendra Puri awoke, he realized that was Krishna. Krishna came to him, but he didn't recognize him. So he lost a vapu of Krishna and became greatly disturbed by thinking, oh, how could I not recognize my Lord? How could I not recognize my sweet Lord? But however, what gave him Madhavendra Puri peace and tranquility was he remembered the Vani of what Krishna told him. He remembered that he said, go find this deity and install him on the hill, and that gave him peace. So he was still able to associate with Krishna, even though physically, when he recognized Krishna wasn't there, he was very distraught. But once he remembered the instructions of Krishna, he was with Krishna. So the instructions of Krishna are just as potent as the vapu. And also interesting in the Madhavendra Puri pastime is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but in this verse that I'm reading today, it says, Lord Brahmā said, I desire blessings for both you and your wife. And I think in the previous verse, I'll just go to that. 3:13. In the previous verse, it stated, O worshipful one, please give us direction. This is Manu speaking. For the execution of duty within our working capacity, so we can follow it for fame in this life and progress in the next. So you see that the devotee naturally becomes famous without necessarily trying to, just by following the instructions of the spiritual master. Sometimes the fame just comes automatically, just like with Madhavendra Puri. He became famous because the Gopinath deity saved him kheer, which we went, and you were there, Avi? Yeah, we had this. It was probably the best kheer I ever had in my life. It was really nectar. Anyways, he became famous because the Gopinath deity saved him a pot of sweet rice kheer. And even before, so, okay, let me go back. After Madhavendra Puri installed the deity on the hill, he performed worship of the deity. After some time, the deity was feeling really hot. He instructed Madhavendra Puri in the dream again. He said, I want you to go to Vrindavan, and no, I want you to go to Jagannath Puri. I want you to get sandalwood paste to cool my body. Okay? And so, I don't know if you guys know the geography of that, but from Govardhan to Jagannath Puri, that's over 1,000 miles. It's over, and Madhavendra Puri walked there. Just see the surrender of Madhavendra Puri without hesitation. Without hesitation, he followed the order of Krishna, of his worshipful Lord. He walked 1,000 miles, even without necessarily inquiring, okay, I know you're hot, is there something else we could put? No, Krishna wanted sandalwood paste, so that's what he went and he did. And what happened was, he walked 1,000 miles, which is really crazy. And when he got there, like I said, the Gopinath deity saved him a pot of rice, sweet rice. And everybody heard about this. That, oh, wow, well, this deity is saving sweet rice for this great soul. So he became famous, and this was in Ramuna, before he even reached Jagannath Puri. He became famous without trying. And Madhavendra Puri, he didn't want this fame. He actually tried to abstain from it, but he knew that when he was in Ramuna, he had to go to Jagannath Puri to follow the order. So as he's on the way, so many people were applauding him, so many people were glorifying him, and he didn't necessarily want it. So the point is, when you follow the instructions of the guru, sometimes you will become naturally famous. They see, especially when you have pure heart and pure consciousness. So in this verse again, it says that if the son is unreservedly willing to be guided by the father is 10 times more eager to instruct and guide him by all means. The guru, the father, is eager to guide us, actually, but because we're not willing to take his instruction, then what happens is he's only going to give us what we need at that time. But for those who are more eager, those who are already surrendered and eager for that service, the guru is very pleased with that person, and he endows them with all types of benedictions, which comes in the form of service. And in this regard, ultimately, what the guru wants us to do is become Vaishnavas. What Krishna wants us to do, he wants us to become pure devotees. He wants us to become Vaishnavas. Okay? And one purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada says the first qualification of a Vaishnava is simplicity. I want to talk about that for a little bit. How simplicity is very important for the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. I'm actually going to go to that. Because this simplicity is not only external, it's also internal. You can externally be simple by wearing simple cloth, simple clothes, living by eating simple means. But if you're internally full of material desires, you're not simple. You're actually duplicitous, and this duplicity is an antithesis of spiritual advancement. This duplicity, we have to be very careful of this duplicity. We should not outwardly portray ourselves as great Vaishnavas or greatly renounced, but internally we're cultivating so many material desires. Like the Mayavadis, for example, I've seen it in Vrindavan, they'll wear a saffron cloth, right? But internally, they're living very simply, but internally they want to become God. So they're not simple, actually. They might externally present themselves as being simple, but internally, because they are cultivating material desires, then there's no actually scope for advancing Krishna consciousness. So, in this one purport, it's pretty, not so heavy, but it is an instruction for all of us how we should always remain simple. So, in this pastime, this is the Lord saying, Lord Chaitanya, the Lord replied, I cannot tolerate seeing the face of a person who's accepted the renounced order of life, but who still talks intimately with a woman. Purport, Prabhupada says, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that saralata, or simplicity, is the first qualification of a Vaishnava. Whereas duplicity or cunning behavior is a great offense against the principles of devotional service. As one advances in Krishna consciousness, one must gradually become disgusted with material attachment and thus become more and more attached to the service of the Lord. If one is not factually detached from material activities, but still proclaims himself advanced in devotional service, he is cheating. No one will be happy to see such behavior. So what's going on in this pastime where Lord Chaitanya is saying, I cannot tolerate the face of a single person? So in this pastime, he had one of his associates, Chota Haridas. So there was, okay, let's go back. Lord Chaitanya had 3.5 associates. Okay, he had Ramananda Roy, Swarupa Damodar, Shikhi Mahidi, and Madhavi Devi. So Madhavi Devi was a elderly renunciate, and she had really good rice. Such good rice that when the Lord came to visit, I forget whose house it was. I think it was Govinda. Anyways, I forget whose house he came to visit, but they wanted that rice from Malaji Devi Dasi. So they sent Chota Haridas to go get it, and Chota Haridas was a renunciate at this point. So he went to talk to Malaji Devi Dasi. Mind you, she is an associate. She's an associate of the Lord. Nevertheless, she's elderly and she's a woman's body. So he begged the rice from the Lord, and then when Chota Haridas brought it back to the Lord asked, "This rice is high quality. Where'd you get this rice from, Chota Haridas?" And the Lord found out that he begged it from Malaji Devi Dasi, and this is after the Lord found that out. This is where he's saying this. Even though he's elderly, even though she's an associate of the Lord Chaitanya is still instructing that those in the renounced order of life should not be duplicitous, should not proclaim themselves greatly renounced, but then still interacting with the opposite sex. And Prabhupada saying this purport that goes directly against the principles of simplicity, which is the first qualification, like Bhattisiddhanta Saraswati is saying, the first qualification of a Vaishnava is his simplicity. So the Guru and the Father wants us to cultivate this sense of simplicity. Manu was simple, he was simple-hearted, because before he even approached, or before he even got instructions from Lord Brahmā, he was open, he was simple. He didn't have duplicitous behavior. He was open and he was able to receive his instructions without hesitation. But those who are duplicitous, even after receiving the instruction of the Guru, they're not going to be able to follow it, because externally they might portray themselves to follow the instruction of the Guru, but internally they're actually cultivating resentment towards that order because they're not fully recognizing of the spiritual master's position. So this internal simplicity, like I said, it's synonymous with renunciation. Just how external simplicity is synonymous with renunciation. We're trying to have our farm community, simple living, high thinking. What does this simple living actually mean, though? You see that even in New Vrindavan, at one point, I didn't mean to say that name, but at one farm community in ISKCON, they had the simple living and high thinking, but then over time, you see externally you might be simple, but if internally you're cultivating material desires, you just see the outcome, see the result. It will deteriorate, it will degrade. Even if, no matter how hard you externally try to pose yourself as simple, if internally you're not renounced and internally you're not simple, it will manifest. And you see that. You see that in certain farm communities that they might start off simple, but because they're cultivating material desires, it gradually deteriorates. So this internal simplicity is synonymous with renunciation. And ultimately, I'm just going to go to this before I speak on it. But renunciation is required for bhakti, and Prabhupada makes this point in this verse. This is interesting, that the Supreme Person God said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. And thus he is a true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. But in the purport, Prabhupada says that a person acting in Krishna conscious works for the satisfaction of the whole without self-interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is a perfect sannyasi. That's interesting. He's saying he's a perfect sannyasi just by acting for the pleasure of Krishna.
Even though in the purport, the word for word, Prabhupada translates sannyasi as in the renounced order of life. But it's interesting. In the next verse, if you see, what is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga or linking oneself with the Supreme. Osana Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces desire for sense gratification. Okay, this is interesting. In the previous verse, you see that Prabhupada translates sannyasi as in a renounced order. But in this verse, Prabhupada just translates sannyasam as renunciation. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, real sannyas yoga or bhakti yoga means one should know his constant position as a living entity. So therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. So this is where I'm hitting at. A sannyasi is in the highest order of life. That is true. A sannyasi is one who's simultaneously, he is a leader of society. But a sannyasi also is not only an order of life, it's also a state of mind that we should all cultivate. Prabhupada is saying it clearly right here. A person in Krishna consciousness is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. Does that mean we have to does that mean we have to become a sannyasi to become renounced? No, we don't externally have to have a danda to be a sannyasi, right? Prabhupada claim a person who is a sannyasi is one who does everything for satisfaction of Krishna. So I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that the order of life of sannyasi has no importance. I'm not saying that. It's greatly needed, and without proper sannyasis, there could be no gradual development of society. Sannyasis are needed, and sannyasi is an order of life. But it's simultaneously, a sannyasi is also a level of consciousness that we should all aspire for, whatever ashram we're in. It's clear right here. Prabhupada's saying this clearly. And if you read Prabhupada's books, he says it time and time again also that sannyasi is simultaneously a state of consciousness, and it's also an order of life that those who are highly advanced can take up that role of sannyasi of leading of a society. So we should cultivate desires to please Krishna. We should cultivate the desire to be fully detached from material entanglements. And we should hold the desire to be simple, not just simple-hearted externally, but internally as well. But you see, nowadays, it's complex to be simple nowadays. It's very complex to be simple. Like, we're trying to get this farm property. There's so much complexities within this, trying to just get a community that's simple. Just to be, it's easier to be complex than simple, actually, nowadays. Because society is training everybody to be complex. Go, get the latest iPhone, get the latest gadget, do this, do that. Go to get money so you can go to the grocery store and get food. This is all complex. It's more simple to grow your own food. It's more simple to be in society where you're able to cultivate Krishna consciousness. It's more simple to live off the benefits of nature, off the beauties of nature. But society is making it very difficult for us to do so. Very difficult for us to be simple nowadays. So, but it's interesting, although we should cultivate internal simplicity and external simplicity at the highest level, when you reach the highest level, actually, spiritual life is very complex. You see this in the life of Lord Chaitanya, in the Chaitanya-charitamrita. It describes how Lord Chaitanya, it describes the different emotions he gets. He simultaneously is happy, he's simultaneously angry. He's simultaneously mad, he's simultaneously humble. So but through these complexities of emotions, he gets the highest bliss, actually. So as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we strive actually for these complexities in spiritual emotions, because that awards us the greatest bliss. And we get that by eternally being simple and externally being simple. But after reaching that highest stage, then spiritual life, actually the emotions are very complex, and even the relations are very complex. It's hard to understand the relationship of certain devotees, actually. Although this is Vishnu Tattva, that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, with Advaita Acharya invited Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya into his home. And Lord Advaita Acharya made a great feast for them. And Lord Chaitanya one day was like, oh, I'm a sannyasi, I can't take so much food stuff. And Lord Advaita Acharya was like, just stop the nonsense and eat the food. You are the Lord, you can eat so much food. And on the other end, Lord Nityananda was like, this is all you prepared? I'm hungry. And he prepared like a massive feast with like 100 preparations. Lord, and done this like, I've been fasting for days and this is all you have for me? And then after that, after Lord Nanda took the prasadam, he threw some prasadam at the Acharya, and then the Acharya started dancing in ecstasy. This is very complex, actually. These are very complex subject matters, right? So spiritual life, when you get to the highest stage, the relationships between the Vaishnavas are very complex, and the emotions are very complex. Nonetheless, in the beginning stages, we shouldn't be complex. We should be simple so we can become complex. Who can understand this? Only devotees can try to understand this. So we should have simplicity as a revolution, as a means to revolt against this modern complex civilization. It actually is a protest. Prabhupada writes in one purport that when one takes to Krishna consciousness, he's more or less having declaration of war against Maya. So Prabhupada says that when one takes to Krishna consciousness, is more or less a declaration of war against Maya. So when we're having these farm communities, it is a declaration against the demonic, ubiquitous understanding of society that we need to be more and more entangled in material gratifications. It is a war against Maya, is a declaration. So when we have these farm communities, it is supposed to be simple living, but even acquiring it, you're seeing is so complex because we are declaring war against Maya. You know, as I said earlier, Durga creates obstacles. Her job is to create obstacles for us. Her job is to do so, but nonetheless, if we become conscious of Krishna, we can overcome it. Even if there's obstacles in trying to be simple, we will overcome it. Krishna is promising that. He's giving us full promise of that. And ultimately, I asked my Guru Maharaj this when I took shelter under him. I asked him, Guru Maharaj, does the Krishna consciousness movement need more lawyers or does it need more renunciates? And his reply was, the Krishna consciousness movement needs more revolutionaries. That's what he told me. He didn't say one or the other. He said that the Krishna consciousness movement needs more revolutionaries. And the greatest revolution we can do is by establishing these farm communities. That is the greatest modern day revolution we can do because it's directly counteracting this complex civilization that's encouraging us to be hedonistic. So we should follow the orders of our spiritual master. We should follow the orders of our predecessor acharyas. Prabhupada is teaching us in this verse that when the father is qualified and the son is qualified, then prosperity reigns for all the society. So we should be qualified in trying to carry out the orders and instructions of our spiritual master. And when we do so, you will see that Krishna's hand in everything. You will see how the first step is to surrender. Then we abide by the instructions. You don't try to abide by the instructions and surrender. You surrender first. Manu is teaching us, you surrender first and then you abide by the instructions. And by doing so, all blessings come upon you. So I'll stop my class here. I'll open up any corrections, comments, or questions, or anything like that. I'll give you.
Hare Krishna. So, there's two comments and a question, but when you're making that point just about like simplicity, and anyways, it's like it's a big subject, but simply put it, I mean, it's just you're talking about, but just the way everything's geared right now. I mean, to like grow your own food, it's more expensive. It takes more time. Just if like for instance, like nowadays, like with our phones, if you want to go somewhere, I mean, you need Google Maps. Otherwise, It's like, how do you like navigate? Like you go to the other part of town, and then your phone dies. It's like you might die because you'd be lost over there. I remember before smartphones, when I was growing up, like I'd look at like MapQuest or whatever and like write the directions down and then whatever, just like go to the other part of town. And
Yeah.
Like that, or like whatever. If I got lost, I was just like try to figure my way back. But anyways, things are just so different right now. But to be, quote unquote simple, or what would they say, uncivilized?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a good point.
It's so expensive to do that. But then there's so many whole movements of people, whatever, living off the grid, whatever, no electricity, or they have some type of like hybrid situation.
Yeah.
But anyways, just want to say that. Another comment I had, I wanted to read this. Let me pull it up real quick. This is from Krishna book, the introduction where Prabhupada talks about his father. So I'll just read that. So, to my father, Gaura Mohan De, 1849 to 1930. So Prabhupada said, a pure devotee of Krishna who raised me as a Krishna-conscious child from the beginning of my life. In my boyhood ages, he instructed me how to play the mridanga. He gave me Radha Krishna Vigraha to worship, and he gave me Jagannath Rath to duly observe the festival as my childhood play. He was kind to me, and I imbibed from him the ideas later on solidified by my spiritual master, the Eternal Father. So anyways, we were just talking a lot just about relationship between the father and the son, of course, on the spiritual platform. And we see here that like Srila Prabhupada, his, like the interactions or the duty of the father and like how that actually like manifested. Of course, that'll be like different person to person. And I thought this was like interesting also, but Srila Prabhupada, the father has his duty, but it seems also like the spiritual master solidifies that. And I remember hearing somewhere that like Prabhupada said something like that, like I learned like Krishna consciousness from my father, but then like from my spiritual master. I can't remember exactly what he said.
Yeah.
I learned like book publication, or like I learned like the Siddhanta or something like that. So that's kind of like interesting dynamic. And so my question was, you were reading in one purport about in talking about that, about duplicity and cunningness.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if like, how do we like recognize like if we have like duplicitous or like cunning behavior in Krishna consciousness, and to ward against that?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, duplicity can be taken in different ways. One form of duplicity is that outwardly you were like glorifying one devotee, but inwardly you have envy towards him, right? And so one way you can recognize it is that you see maybe some devotees like doing huge on books, right? And internally you're like, man, like, he's only doing books to like, he might be like cheat. I don't know. You might just have some ill feelings towards it, but externally you be like, oh, Jai Hare Krishna Prabhu, you popped off, whatever. But internally you're like envious towards him. And ultimately, duplicity, it is a big subject, but in that regard, the way Lord Chaitanya was putting it, that you shouldn't externally present yourself as a great renunciate, but then you're doing all types of nonsense, right? Like, that's very duplicitous, as, you're in an announced order of life, but you're cultivating material desires, and you are acting upon them, right? So duplicity can also come in your actions when you see it, like, okay, on one end you're supposed to be renounced, but on the other end you're intimately associating with the opposite sex. They don't go together. But on another end, actually, I was just reading Krishna book the other day that Vasudev, he was duplicitous with Kamsa, because he told Kamsa, okay, you can have all my kids, don't kill Devaki right now. He was duplicitous because outwardly he was trying to appease Kamsa and tell him, okay, nothing's going to happen to you, whatever. But then inwardly he knew that even if his Krishna was born or manifested, appeared, he would be saved. So there is some scope for duplicity. I forget where I read that, but when you're dealing with duplicitous people, you have to be duplicitous sometimes when you're dealing with duplicitous people. It's not that in Krishna consciousness, when we're dealing with evil, tyrannical people, we just let them walk all over it. Sometimes, even Prabhupada writes that in one purport as well, like for Vaishyas, in their duty, sometimes they have to be duplicitous. They lie and say, I'm not getting enough money if you don't buy this such and such product. Prabhupada makes that point. But it's in his duty. So it's not wrong. It's not any fault on his part. So there is some scope for duplicity when you're dealing with duplicitous people, but when it comes to devotees and Vaishnavas, we should always inwardly and outwardly present ourselves the same. It shouldn't be like outwardly we're saying one thing, but inwardly you're doing something different. Inwardly, outwardly should be the same. That's my understanding of it. Okay. Anything else?
It was two things. So I liked this point you were making on Vapu and Vani. I improperly thought that. I mean, both of course are important, but like you were saying, this Vani is of higher importance. I wanted to read. There was this instance in the Bhagavatam. It's from the 15th chapter, the first canto, when Krishna disappears, and the Pandavas are lamenting in his disappearance, and Arjuna, essentially, I'll just read. He says, now, after of course describing that he's in lamentation, he's in tears, and he's recalling all these sweet pastimes he had with Krishna, he makes a point. He says, now, of course, in order to find himself being pacified, he says, now I'm attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. And Sutta Goswami says, thus being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in the great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from material contamination. So this Vani is of course, increasingly important. Let me see. Chandan made a comment. Oh, forgive me. So you said that Krishna's instructions are non-different from Krishna. Did you?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So he was texting me now.
Well, anything related. The thing is, Krishna, his paraphernalia, on the transcendental platform, it all becomes equal. So yes, Krishna and his instructions are equal. So when you meditate, I made that point in reference to the guru, that when your guru might not be manifested before you, but when you meditate on his instructions, then you're always with the guru. Prabhupada makes this point with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that, he said, my guru has always been with me. There's never been a moment where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not with Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada makes that point very clearly, that when he was in the West, he said he always felt the presence of his Guru Maharaj because he was following his instructions. So yes, the Vanu, and when the spiritual master gives you an instruction and you follow that instruction, you're associating with the spiritual master. But when you act with false ego, then what happens is you lose sight of that position in your spiritual master. So yeah, it is the same.
So basically, the Vani and Vapu is only a terminology that's used for the spiritual master. It can't be used for Krishna. The reason is because Krishna doesn't have a body.
That's true.
See, the spiritual master, it's understood that his body is spiritual because it's completely engaged in Krishna service. It's spiritualized, and it is the form that he has accepted to engage in his pastimes in the material world. But the difference between the spiritual master and Krishna is that the spiritual master actually accepts a body that is made of material energy, even though it is transformed into spiritual energy, or it is like spiritual. But for Krishna, it's not like that. He is completely coming with his Satchidananda Vigraha.
That's true.
And that form of Krishna and Krishna himself, there's no difference at all. So, same thing with Krishna's, any instruction, everything. The spiritual master is as good as Krishna, but Krishna's instructions are Krishna himself.
Right. But you can say the same. So the spiritual master, what I was saying was, when you follow the instructions of the spiritual master, you're also associating with the spiritual master. And Prabhupada makes that point, where, like, I don't know if you heard it, but I'm not going to go through all of it. But that was the point I was making.
That's correct.
Yeah.
When you hear Krishna's instructions, you're associating with Krishna because the instructions are Krishna also.
Right.
But just the terminology of as good as is only used when there is an apparent difference. But here there's no apparent difference at all.
I understand. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Jita, you got a question?
You said about the father and the mother representing spiritual master in the Vedas? I thought it was, and maybe I misheard you.
No, the spiritual master, yeah. So, the spiritual master is like the father and the Vedas is like the mother.
Okay.
Yeah, the mother, I mean, it's just described like that. It's described in the Sastras, or Acharyas describe it like that. And then pretty much when you get initiated, it even said in the 11th canto that you can't even understand the imports of the Vedas without a spiritual master. So the spiritual master reveals the imports of the Vedas to you by following. So they go hand in hand. The spiritual master in the Vedas, even if you're not learned, greatly learned, he can still reveal the purport of the Vedas to you. Now this is describing the Tesham Sadhata Yuktanam verse that Prabhupada says that even if someone is illiterate, the spiritual master can still guide them and by the conclusion of the Vedas. So yes, the Vedas is the mother and the father is the spiritual master.
And then on this point between, what you spoke about simplicity and not, of course, being duplicitous, especially in our dealings with devotees. It's also advised, however, if one is envious of a devotee, that they should glorify and serve that devotee. So I guess, is it more the consciousness that of which is done with? Because it can be purifying, I thought, to a degree, to glorify the devotee.
Yeah, of course. But the point is, you shouldn't internally cultivate that envy. Actually, Prabhupada says that envy comes from fear, actually. When you fear, then envy comes. I remember reading that in the Bhagavatam. So sometimes people fear that one devotee is going to get more recognition than us, or sometimes people fear that one devotee is better than us or whatever. And then envy accompanies that. So, yes, you should always, I'm not saying don't glorify the devotee, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying inwardly, you shouldn't cultivate that envy. Yeah, you should recognize it, and internally you should recognize the position of the devotee and why envy of the devotee is dangerous. You should never envy the devotee, or any Vaishnava in that matter, or any living entity in that matter. Envy is very dangerous. Guru Maharaj makes a point about this. Envy is very, very dangerous. You shouldn't envy any living entity. So, yeah, even if you recognize you have some envy, it's not that you shouldn't stop glorifying the devotee. You should internally realize, why do you have that envy? It's probably because you have cultivating material desires alongside of that. Because you're cultivating material desires alongside of that, you're cultivating envy towards other devotees because you want to accept that glorification instead of the devotee. Yeah, you go ahead.
You were mentioning that when you asked Guru Maharaj, what does the movement need more?
Yeah.
Guru Maharaj said it needs more revolutionaries. Was there any follow-up? Did you ask more questions? I'm confused, what revolutionary?
Yeah, okay, so pretty much the context was that we were talking just about the movement, and we were talking about what the movement needs, okay? What does the movement need? Because we were talking about how there's a lot of disarray in the movement, there's so many schisms and stuff, right? So that's when I asked him, Guru Maharaj, does the movement need more lawyers, or does it need more renunciates? And that's when he said that in that context, it needs more revolutionaries in that context. So as far as follow-up on that, just listen to Guru Maharaj's lectures. Guru Maharaj has so many lectures of what it means to be revolutionary, what he wants of his disciples. Ultimately, and I said that already in the purport that Prabhupada said that when you surrender to Krishna, it's more or less a declaration of war against Maya. So by surrendering to Krishna, automatically you're revolting against this idea. It's also in Mothers and Masters, actually. Guru Maharaj makes this point in the beginning of Mothers and Masters, what a revolutionary is. Yeah. Have you read that?
I don't remember. I've read Mothers and Masters.
Yeah, read the beginning of Mothers and Masters. Guru Maharaj talks about what revolutionary in different contexts. Yeah, just read that part. So all right, mothers, any questions, comments?
You were emphasizing how before we can follow the instructions of the spiritual master, we have to surrender onto them. And it reminded me of something that I've heard a few times, that up until the point of initiation, there's no real surrender. So could you talk about how those two...
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Actually, initiation, it is required. It is in our tradition to do so. But I've also heard Prabhupada say that initiation is a formality. Externally, like the as far as the fire sacrifice, all that. Initiation is actually before this whole thing. It's not that, okay, I get the neck beads, I get a new name, now I'm initiated. No, actually, you should have been initiated way before then. You should have been his disciple, because becoming a disciple just means that you're cultivating discipline. Disciple means discipline, right? So even before you actually accept initiation, you should already be surrendered to the orders of your spiritual master. You should already be in a state of consciousness where, just like Manu in this pastime, even before Lord Brahmā instructed him, he was already fully, without hesitation, willing to abide by his instructions. He was already his disciple even before accepting the instructions from him. So this is the example that we should also follow. That before initiation is, as far as the fire sacrifice in the whole procession, that is something that is it is a ritual that is necessary, and because that kind of this marks it creates a samskar. It creates a samskar when you go through that. But even before that, you should already be surrendered. You should already be disciple even before that. Is that your question? Okay. Anything else? Sit. Stretch. We
made this point that we should Trinadapi Sunicena.
Yeah.
It should extend to all living entities. So, in our dealings with karmis, how can we respect them? Well, because as a preacher, Madhyamadikari, you have to see that, okay, there is some difference between those who are higher and lower, but then simultaneously we have to consider ourselves lower than them, but we also know we're kind of higher than them.
Yeah.
Anyways, just how do we respect them,
well,
and treat them properly?
This point is actually mentioned in Speaking Strong on Srila Prabhupada's service. Guru Maharaj makes the point that respecting other living entities actually means bringing them to Krishna consciousness. It's not that, because you see the respect in a mundane society. Oh, how you doing today, sir? Thank you so much. It's all external formalities. But real respect is seeing them as part and parcel of Krishna and helping them revive their Krishna consciousness. That's by respecting living entities that Guru Maharaj makes that point, speaking strongly. And I'm also making that point that, yes, if you're dealing with duplicitous people, sometimes you have to be duplicitous, right? It's not that it's necessary being disrespectful by doing so. The thing is, when you're dealing with duplicitous people, sometimes you do that to save for a higher cause. Like I said, just for Vasudev. He had to be duplicitous for Kamsa for a higher cause of saving his wife, right? If he wasn't duplicitous, then his wife could have got killed at that moment. So sometimes duplicity is necessary for a higher cause, but like I'm saying, it all comes with intelligence. Like everything can be used in Krishna's service. If you're using it for Krishna's service, then it's glorious. But if you're using it to propagate your own envy, then it becomes a hinder in your own Krishna consciousness. That's the point. So yes, you respect the karmis by bringing them to Krishna consciousness. You give them your association, you don't take their association. Is that good, or?
What's to say? Vishal.
Yeah, maybe not. Okay. All right.
Vishal Prabhu says we should respect our parents, but if they give us advice that is not Krishna conscious, we must reject it.
Yeah, I made that point in class that I'm not gonna go. I said it already in class that, okay, if your instruction is not bona fide, you reject the instruction, but the position of the parents is always going to be that of respect. You should always respect your parents. And it's actually, like I said, jiva himsa, by disrespecting them because they're giving you bad instruction. You respect them. It's an art you have to learn, how to respect somebody but not accept their instruction. And it takes time. It's kind of, Krishna consciousness, especially when dealing with certain people, it can become a challenge. But at least we should recognize that we should have that respect for them. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, vancha kalpatu, vacha, kipa sindhu vaya vacha, patita nam, pavimayo, vaishnava, namo namah.